The French are famous for bringing a certain style to everyday life. In the early part of this century, a certain Frenchman made a name for himself by bringing unique styling and advanced technology to the cars his company built. On this very risky proposition, André Citroën bet his entire company, repeatedly, leading the stockholders, creditors, and customers of Citroën to wonder, is this any way to run a car company? A white wedge shape cuts along the pavement. Its profile suggests a modern sports car like a Ferrari, a Corvette, perhaps a Honda NSX. But in fact, it's a sedan whose line came to market many years before aerodynamic styling became popular. This car, and a matching vehicle speeding from the opposite direction, offer some features only now, 25 years after their introduction, becoming commonly available in production automobiles. These two cars sport a lineage which has become synonymous with all things French. And these white wedges, powered by Maserati engines, supported by a high-tech hydraulic suspension system, represent the pinnacle of achievement for their manufacturer. The nameplate behind the driver's door reads Citroën SM. These two SMs are speeding towards a rendezvous. John Chassin and Bill Green are friends who love their SMs and know that mutual support is the only way to keep them running. After all, Citroën has no American sales or service operation and hasn't made the SM for more than 20 years. John and Bill get together periodically to swap stories, trade tips, and share their appreciation for the consummation of a Citroën tradition. They both know that the SM didn't appear out of nowhere. It was the product of a long heritage of sometimes radical innovations in technology and styling, and the guts to risk putting those design advances into production automobiles. That tradition began with the company's founder, André Citroën. In 1913, this Frenchman of Dutch Jewish extraction founded the Citroën Gear Company in Paris. The company made large gears with a unique chevron facing that allowed them to function smoothly and very quietly. A stylized form of the chevron design became the company's trademark and remains so to this day. With the outbreak of World War I, Reserve Captain André Citroën returned to military service.
André Citroën launched his Rosalie 4 operation. The little Rosalie covered 300,000 kilometers on the Montlhéry speed ring at an average speed of more than 93 kilometers per hour, beating 106 world records and 191 international records.
Up to this point, André Citroën had taken a series of calculated risks to advance automotive technology and expand his company. He borrowed money to present each new line, and he'd been able to pay it back only when each line succeeded. In 1934, only 2 years after Rosalie's introduction, Citroën decided essentially to replace it by blending all the technologies he'd pioneered and popularized with a few even more radical ideas.
He had borrowed some ideas from America, from Henry Ford, in terms of production quantities and simplicity. But he also had some very advanced ideas of his own, and his idea was to present in a single car a revolutionary step to the future. And he put all his money on the line and did just that.
André Citroën's revolutionary step was the introduction of a technology practically unknown at the time, front-wheel drive. Up to this point, virtually all cars were pushed along by the rear wheels. Though front-wheel drive offered considerable advantages of traction and stability, the technical obstacles had kept all but a very few car makers from attempting it. And of these, only the American Cord Company made more than a few hundred front-drive cars. Even so, Cords like this L29 suffered serious reliability problems, their constant velocity joints failing prematurely due to inadequate lubrication. It was not until 1966 that the Oldsmobile Toronado became the first front-wheel drive car to achieve success in the American marketplace. But in 1933, at least a quarter century ahead of his time, André Citroën wanted a car of completely new design, with no components carried over from earlier vehicles. A costly move that earned the antipathy of his head of design, Maurice Broglie. A talented young engineer named André Lefebvre was instead recruited to head up the project. Lefebvre came to Citroën from Renault, having started out in aviation, a background that would come into play as the car developed. Adding to the project's sizable cost was the necessary demolition and rebuilding of the Quai de Javel factory in just 6 months. The new car was introduced in 1934, descriptively named the Traction Avant, or front drive. The entire development of the Traction 7A had taken just over a year.
When it came out, it combined a number of features, any one of which would have been enough to identify it. Front-wheel drive, of course, torsion bar suspension, 4 independent wheels, 4-wheel hydraulic brakes, an engine with removable linings and push-rod-operated valves, and no running board.
The Traction was the first road car to include a torsion bar suspension, under license from the German auto engineer Ferdinand Porsche. The power-assisted brakes were likewise advanced and likewise licensed from the Lockheed Aircraft Company. None of these features were absolutely new in a production automobile, but it was the first time that they'd been offered together in a single car. Like the Rosalie, the Traction used welded unibody construction, the strength of which Citroën promoted by once again pushing the car off a cliff, and this time driving it away. The styling of the Traction, offered in both sedan and convertible versions, certainly was a giant step forward. Front drive and the absence of a drive shaft permitted designer Flaminio Bertoni to set the Traction quite low to the ground. The aeronautic orientation of Project Chief Lefebvre was evident in the unprecedented attention given to the car's aerodynamics. The Traction's sleek lines and distinctively sloping radiator grille made it look as if it were moving, even when it was standing still. However, because of the Traction Avant's radically shortened development cycle, not everything about the car worked perfectly. The constant velocity joints suffered the same sort of reliability problems that had plagued the Cord. They were replaced by more primitive but dependable universal joints mounted back to back. André Citroën had originally planned to include a kind of automatic transmission in the Traction. When the automatic proved unreliable, it was scrapped and replaced by a manual transmission. It was designed on a kitchen table in just 2 weeks.
He just seemed to be able to pick and choose of advanced features and then, amazingly, meld them into a package, because if his suspension had been wrong, his transmission had been wrong, if his engine had been wrong, the car would have been wrong.
The Traction Avant was not wrong. Many in the press and public regarded it as sensational, an engineering masterpiece. This was the car on which André Citroën had bet his company, but it was a bet he was destined to lose. André Citroën had staked everything on the Traction Avant. When it was introduced in 1934, the Traction was the most technologically advanced production car in the world. Sadly, this wasn't enough to save the fortunes of André Citroën and his motor company. The expense of developing the Traction and rebuilding the Quai de Javel factory, along with André Citroën's growing casino debts and the global economic crash of the 1930s, combined to push the company to the brink of bankruptcy. The French government asked Citroën's principal creditor, Michelin Tires, to take control of the company. The price was the layoff of 8,000 workers and the removal of André Citroën as president of the firm bearing his name. In 1935, a claim for his traction Avant was still ringing in the press, but the Depression had driven sales to their lowest ebb. And André Citroën died of cancer at the age of 57.
Just at the time when the traction Avant was being recognized as a car that he predicted it would be, unfortunately his gambling caught up with him and he was out of the company and subsequently died, I guess, always with a broken heart in a situation like this. But he didn't get really to see the fruits of his entrepreneurial genius, and those fruits went on to the present day.
The company struggled on under new leadership, fine-tuning the traction Avant line, introducing new variations. Early versions of the traction were considered somewhat underpowered, a shortcoming the company soon remedied by introducing the famed 15.6, 15 CV and 6 cylinders. Within a few years of André Citroën's death, sales began to climb. Soon the traction Avant was the most popular production car of the day.